Welcome, everybody. What a nice group of friends is here. We are happy to end this week in a very nice place with wonderful people, wonderful art around us, and a bit of art talk. I'm Ann Temkin. I'm the Marie-José and Henry Kravis Chief Curator of Painting and Sculpture at MoMA. I have here Sandy Rower, the president of the Calder Foundation, and Bernard Ruiz Picasso, president of, you have to say the whole name because it's complicated.
Hello, good evening. Yes, I'm co-founder with my mother of Musée Picasso in Malaga, in Spain, and also I co-found with my wife a foundation which is called Foundation Armin and Bernard Ruiz Picasso. And so,
Fava.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that most of you have seen the absolutely glorious exhibition at the brand new Gallery Uptown, but you don't need to have seen it for the conversation that we'll have. But as you know, it's an exhibition at Almin's Gallery of the work by Calder and Picasso, curated by the grandsons of Calder and Picasso in dialogue with each other, and exclusively based on work from their families' collections. So it's sort of on three levels, an extremely intimate show in a beautifully intimate space, I think. And as far as I know, I've only heard from everyone who's gone in the, 10 days or so since it's opened, admiration and pleasure that it happened, is happening. So my first question to Sandy and Bernard is, how did it come into existence? Because looking at it, I think anybody immediately knows it was not sort of an overnight production.
Well, thank you, Anne. We had that idea, or we were thinking about what to do while opening a new gallery space in New York, and my dear spouse Armin had this quite astonishing idea to do Calder Picasso show, or Picasso Calder show. I don't know at the beginning what was really the main idea, and because she's a good friend with Sandy, she select painting, which is actually on exhibit in the gallery, and she sent that image to Sandy, and soon after, or even the same day, you answer to that idea of bringing and making a show on those two artists. Then it took not quite a long time, but many meetings, many reunions had been.
It's 2 years.
Yeah, well, let's say yes, two years of quite intense dialogue. Yeah, between ping pong, boxing, and
Arm wrestling.
No, but learning.
Lovemaking.
Tell about it. So it did start with that concept, which then had to be put down, study, and we've been working on that idea, which, yeah, of course, at the beginning it was something very interesting to do, but then we had to dig into the subject, and it's when it did start to be totally fascinating and I might say I had an extraordinary experience in all what I did learn throughout that project.
I was really worried at the beginning, actually. So when Amin was like, oh, I'm opening this gallery, it's a secret, let's do this project, I have this idea, I was concerned because, as you well know, being the chief curator of MoMA, Picasso, the idea of Picasso is much bigger than Picasso. And I was very concerned about what that show would look like. And so when they sent me the painting, this first painting, which is a late portrait, which some people would say is a self-portrait. He's got the striped sailor shirt and so on. And I responded with an abstract sculpture. It was a test for me to see what Amin and Bernard were thinking, because I didn't know what they were thinking. And in the end, it was this whole long extended dialogue. That was really the surprise for me, that we had a lot to say to each other.
Mm-hmm.
How well did you know each other before this?
Well, we met each other in the early 80s, I think, something like that, or even
Long time ago.
Long time ago, and at the time it was already it did exist on the planet, grandchild of celebrities, of artists, and when I was younger, that idea of forming a club of artist grandson would make me run away as fast as I could.
The idea was my idea. Like, he did the running.
You ran after him.
Yeah, and so we had seen each other in many different events and exhibitions, but never really had the occasion to work or to do something together. And of course, in studying 20th century arts through the eyes of my what is my kind of mission in working on Picasso, of course, Calder is everywhere. Calder is part of all those inventions, the 20th century invention of modern art. So I had kind of many information about Calder, and also due to the fact Calder lived in France, and well, so it was a kind of not intellectual proximity, but a kind of reality. Seeing a Calder work at Saint-Paul-de-Vence or in some of the museum in France or in Europe would have or will give to me a real sense of that 20th century interaction between artists, but never had the occasion to talk with a Calder specialist, or maybe only with Carmen Jimenez. Maybe she was the only one really being linked with us, because we did this Museo Picasso in Malaga with Carmen Jimenez. So that's the only specialist I was able to talk about Calder, but not in that kind of direct study we've been sharing together.
Well, and you're in a very different position as two people who've lived with hundreds of these works, as opposed to go to a place of employment and deal with them. That's different.
Yeah,
I can tell you that's different. So I wonder what the what was the turning point when the conversation went from, oh, would this be a good idea, to, oh, we have a show? What made you decide, oh, this actually is a show, as opposed to some stupid idea that Almin had and wasted some time with?
It was pretty instant, because
really?
we saw these resonances quite immediately, and then began these dialogues that we'd have a 20-minute meeting that would last for 3 hours, and we'd meet around the world on our art jaunts. We meet in Basel, for Art Basel at the Three Kings in the lobby for 20 minutes and then end up going upstairs and having this extended conversation about ideas and motivations and what were these guys doing? And we got to places that were surprising. We didn't know we were going to get there at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it was totally unexpected to get that deep into their creation and the process of creating artworks. Yes, we just can recall that there is no two Picassos, there is no two Calder. They have their own identity in 20th century. And even if some people are followed or have been followed or did follow them in the spirit, you can recognize easily what is a Calder and what is a Picasso artwork. And that process was really fascinating.
It's not very easy to be allowed to see the works in your respective collections, shall we say, for a mere mortal. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in the question of whether at a certain point in this, it went from you each knowing what was in your own deck of cards to inviting the other to freely look at the works by the other person's grandfather in composing the show.
I think the process was really that Bernard would send an image or a series of images, a group of images, and then I would send a group of images, and we'd do this back and forth just by email, and then and commentary, and then eventually get together and then sort out what was the theme, what was the deeper drama going on here, and exclude things. So it was a process of bringing things into the pot and then pulling them out of the pot, and what gelled at the end was a story. There were multiple stories going on, of course. And then, interesting, how does Calder deal with women? And how does Picasso deal with women? They're both actually dealing with a lot of women images. So that's an interesting thing. Or other themes that you, in a way, they're diametrically opposed, but yet it's the same subject matter. Like this question of mortality.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, it was also a kind of we had to start working together, not just saluting each other in some exhibition opening, you know, and that kind of stress we all know when we go to those museum opening.
Fun events.
Yeah, and so we had this kind of two things to realize, which was to try to find some similarities. As I said before, yes, two great artists of 20th century. What that does mean in the art histories, and it's possible to change our attitude or our thoughts about how important it's to give a date to an artwork or not. But first we had to kind of putting those pieces of clay together.
Yeah.
I know you love sculpture, so we had to adjust and to put things together to see how similar those two guys were, and then slowly, by that strong relationship and dialogue, we've been able to unfold that. And even if the show now seems or look like to be sometimes sharing things together, they do share things together, and sometimes they look like quite similar. But in fact, deep down, they are totally different, or they just add something more important in this artistic evolution or artistic development, because beyond the name of Calder or Picasso, what we have two guys who have been working and they've been only working. They just had worked and that's all about their life. It's about working and also enjoying life as much as possible. But they've been working that much that they created such a vast amount of ideas and realities, art objects who are real, that we've been able, by those different selection, I don't know how many selection we did, but 15, 20, I don't know, and slowly we get into that strength and very narrow path where we decided that those works or group were able to go together.
Yeah.
But in that very sharp line where you can afterwards develop a profound diversity and analyze and understanding of what we've been showing. So we can see now the exhibition in Armin Gallery in two different levels. A very factual one, and also then for more professional people, it can be studied more intensively.
But I think at the same time, we're not pretending that this is the be-all Calder Picasso possible show. In fact, it's not. It's not at all. It's the Calder Picasso show that we put together. The show itself is almost like a document of our conversations. So it's not a kind of MoMA super professional show where you draw upon all the great resources in the world. It's just from us.
Yeah.
And so,
which is astounding.
Which is interesting, but maybe there are better choices if you want to tell just the Calder Picasso story. But the story of the show is our conversations.
Yeah.
It's bringing together of the ideas and our realizations, connected and disconnectedness of these two artists from these guys who've been looking at their work for 50 years.
Right. And, you know, you have to realize that, as you mentioned earlier, based in a factual connection. This isn't just your dreaming up the connection. So for those of you, just to remind you, at the famous Spanish Pavilion in the 1937 World's Fair in Paris, in front of Guernica was Calder's Mercury Fountain. So this is a connection that at that one point is particularly dramatic. But
it
before...
kind of reminds us of today. Politically, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Just might happen to do that. Yeah.
And also, well, maybe it might seem a little bit serious what I'm saying about those two artists, but also the most important things. I'm not coming from the university kind of thing, and even if I don't look like that, I feel I found myself behaving like a mechanics, because I look at those works, I touch them, I move them, and it's what I've been doing in the last 40 years, and I think it's the same also with Sandy. So when we dialogue, of course, we have been able to read few books, I think. Well, difficult, but we've been reading them. Right. But we are we're kind of in a small factory or garage where we have to look at things and see how they go together, and how they function. What makes them powerful or in motions, because.
But it's clear from looking at the show that the pleasure of your intuitive process is what you want the viewer to have. You don't want the viewer to go through learning some art history. You want the viewer to go through having a pleasurable, provocative, eye, mind, all your senses kind of experience. For me, I don't know if other people had this in the exhibition, I did not go through the exhibition as one does with some two-artist face-off shows. like, oh, that's Picasso, oh, that's Calder, oh, that's Picasso, oh, that's Calder. I pretty quickly went into a zone where the whole was greater than the sum of the parts, and I didn't care whose was whose. I was interested in the unity of what was in that room. And there's no way that could have happened without your 2 years of conversation, and maybe even without your DNA, because that sort of intermixing of visuality does not just happen. I know that. But the other thing about the exhibition that I think would be surprising to people who might expect a more factual show, because in fact, you know, it could be done in such a way, and maybe will be done in such a way, is that you weren't afraid of putting together things that did not seem to have any connection at all. And I want to hear a little bit more about that, because there were plenty of places in the show where, as you say, there was a theme or there was a visual rhyme. And then there are other places in the show where it's like, I don't know, did you just like that?
The show doesn't have any of those absolute definitions. It doesn't have art historical, curatorial wisdom blankly as its soul, but it has that also. So it has us two car mechanics, as he said, and our whatever wisdom we have from just hanging around this stuff and moving it around and learning about its physicality with our own bodies and all that stuff, which is its own kind of wisdom, and then trying to share that, which is the most difficult part. But also, we did so much research when we began the project. We're both researchers. We love to research.
Yep.
And even just a simple thing, our own discovery about the phrase drawing in space.
Mm-hmm.
This phrase, which was first used for Calder, and it's a widely used phrase for Picasso about his sculptures, as you well know. But it was used 12 years later, or 14 years later, for Picasso than when it was first used for Calder by multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really fascinating that these reviewers called Calder's wire sculptures drawings in space, and then 3 years later Gonzalez wrote it down in a notebook, but it wasn't published, and then later Kahnweiler used this phrase, which is where a lot of people think it originates. Well, it's not where it originates. So those kinds of things are really fascinating to us. I mean, really extraordinarily fascinating.
Yeah.
It's,
And real archaeology.
yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. And so we're producing a catalog. We decided to produce the catalog late so we could shoot the installation
Great.
as the cataloging of the book. Yeah. Instead of rushing it out for the opening, I think we're more excited about it being a document. And we commissioned a series of essays and a wonderful interview of the two of us by Phong Bui here, which is a really exciting document, I think. We had some really good conversations.
Yeah.
I can add also that we had in our as information also we were able to relate in some similarities between Calder family and Picasso family. They were both born in an artist family.
Yes.
They both learned and went to the art academy, and even if they don't, I don't know if he stayed very long at the art academy, but Picasso didn't. He went. But so there's a strong theoretical base in art, and then Sandy was able to just give a very good statement on what Picasso and Calder were both intending to create and to realize, and one day during the interview with Phong, you've been talking about that void, and that really did open to me a whole new perspective of how I could interpret some of Picasso intention, especially on the works on paper. How much Picasso drawings are have to do with three-dimensional intention. And so that question of void and the importance of both Picasso and Calder differences in that search and in that finally in that long art history tradition, which might begin with some prehistoric guy who are not here tonight, but they should.
Right. I mean, both of them lived into just barely, but the last quarter of the 20th century, and both were born before the 20th century began. So although Calder is 17 years younger than Picasso, the general arc of the careers is very similar, and they both, as you said, were lucky enough to work through decades and decades without ever stopping. I wanted to ask you, Sandy, if you learned more working on this with Bernard about Calder's two-dimensional work, because that seems to me something that comes through very strongly in the exhibition that might not have been picked up on without the kick of the Picasso background. Not that they look like Picassos.
No, not at all, right? I mean, most of the paintings in the show have a sense of three dimensions. The big, colorful painting is about objects in space. You know, it's clearly has a relationship to mobiles or the ideas of what mobiles are, what he's trying to communicate. No, I mean, the most I learned about was not specifically the works of art. It was our extended and continued dialogue about the void, meaning that Picasso's obsession with mortality, I came to realize that everything he did in his life and his work was to put death at bay.
Mm-hmm.
And Calder dealt with the void in an external way. He wasn't obsessed with his mortality at all, but he was obsessed with the extension beyond the three dimensions. What is that thing? What's the fourth dimension? Is it time? Is it intuition? Lots of people have different definitions of the fourth or the fifth or the 18th dimension. And Calder was exploring that from a non-scientific way, from a deeply intuitive way.
Yeah.
And sharing that they both were obsessed with this energy, this energetic thing beyond our three dimensions was really the most exciting thing for me.
And one of the ways that makes them both probably modern, would you say that's fair to say? Would that be an overstatement?
I'd say they're modern, and I'd say yeah. But, you know, we're not art historians, we leave it to you.
That's not an art historical statement.
But you see, I've been able to see recently a few short film on Picasso where he is in the south of France showing ceramics and sculpture.
Yeah.
He always makes them turn.
Yeah.
He never, so you don't have a piece of film where Picasso shows a sculpture and whereas the sculpture is stand still. No.
Yeah.
He always make turns the sculpture, and that's I think it's and you can see the tension of just moving that artwork, and I think this kind of very instant definition or information really relate to what 20th century is all about, and what obviously Calder did work on all along his career. I think it's really fascinating the amount of new experiences those two artists brought to us.
Into the
after
art.
A kind of late impressionism statement we had in the early 20th century, but after Gauguin, Cézanne, and somehow Matisse, it's very interesting to see what Picasso did with his collage and sculpture and cubist things, and Calder what he been providing and how we feed, how those two artists have been feeding our mind and idea with new ideas.
And the world with things.
Uh, yes,
Two of the most
fascinating
prolific
to see all those important collectors we admire, who have always somehow in the picture we see or in their living room. You have a Calder, you have Picasso, you have always this kind of and I think one of the most famous relation between two works. It's at the Guggenheim in Venice with Mobile and the Picasso painting in the entrance.
Yeah. And do you feel that also there's something that they shared very much in common in terms of their, today you'd probably say something like attention deficit disorder? Like I remember there's a very famous interview with Christian Zervos in I think 1929, and he says that he's talking to Picasso, and while he's talking to Picasso, Picasso's fooling with a wire, and he's describing how this wire is turning into something kind of incredible, and you just know that there's no time that either of them was actually not able to, at the end of a day, say X many more artworks were now in the world. And it's really, it's certainly not the most important thing the two of them have in common, but it's strikingly characteristic of those two as opposed to anybody else I could name.
I think it's a great characteristic. I think the fact that they were ever so slightly obsessive is something they definitely both shared, and it drove them. And they were artists who didn't make 3 works per year in their obsession. Some obsessive artists just produce these 3 things.
Right, because you're obsessive by working on this one canvas 4,000 hours to get it just so. Right. Yeah. This is the different kind.
And Calder could make many works of art in a day, as could Picasso, and I think that's...
In an hour.
In an hour, without a doubt.
I mean, Picasso, as many of you know, dated many of his paintings and drawings, not only with the year, but with the month and the day. I don't know, there's never an hour.
No, it's really fascinating. Yeah, to see the amount of work he's been creating, and also this doing that selection and show also allow us to see how those two artists took away all what is superficial, not really important in their artwork. So it's a kind of very very deep intention of just living what is essential, what is essential in art, and just to say that wires, and because Calder as father and grandfather were both sculptor, they were doing sculpture. So what you have under the clay, you have wire, and so they somehow Picasso did that too later in this sculpture activity by just taking away all that plaster and clay, just giving life. And we did some study and X-ray and incredible things at MoMA. I remember with the Absinthe glass and other sculpture. And when you look inside the bronze, it's not a Calder, but it
there might be a tennis ball.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's really fascinating that evolution in their art, where they're providing to us something which is going to the essential, to not
I think something that's kind of connected with that, which also is held in common between the two of them in a very surprising way, is how very humble both of them were in their, maybe not in all respects, but in their regard toward material. So there was in fact a deliberate rejection of fancy material, right? And of valuing, without either of them being somebody who made a ready-made, a valuing of ordinary stuff. And what goes with that as well, I think quite astoundingly, is neither of them worked with assistants, even at the most crowded, famous, in-demand moments of their career. And I don't know if either of you knows firsthand or just from, research, family stories, whatever, what drove both of them to not want to be surrounded by what at that point could have been legions of co-workers.
I think it's because it's about their identity and about their own life. So we go back to that more universal question about void, time, death, and so the kind of urge will not allow them, or they will not wish to be embarrassed by some other intention. So they dedicate all their time to create something, and they've been doing that all their life, and they never stop.
These guys were not trying to make a lot of things. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to continue to push that energy out and express themselves in a way that they could continue to live. If you stopped them from making stuff, I'm sure it would have ended.
Yeah.
So having more people make more things wasn't part of the goal. The goal was just having that energy diffuse. Unlike today, where some artists have giant workshops and have lots of things produced because there's a market and there's all that. That wasn't their concern in their days. But you're right about the materiality. I want to get back to that just for a second, because both of these guys were famous for having bits of things around at all times and making things. And my grandfather had stuff in his pocket all the time, all kinds of bits of things, and would sit there and make stuff, just like that interview that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So even if it's a piece of bread, they're squeezing that bread and creating an object out of this dough at the table, doing something. I mean, there are some famous sculptures by Calder of loaves of bread joined together to make a work of art.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's bread in Picasso. There must be.
Famous photographs.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and photograph and any piece of paper and everything will be used to make something, but that goes also with that 20th century idea of modernity. Look at the dance, the ballet, the music. I mean, we can recall all the development of what was the development of art in early 20th century. Picasso did many ballet, and Calder did that too. And so the importance of music, even if they were not very good musicians, I believe, but they were engaged and interested. Let's say for Picasso to stop making cubism just during almost at the end of the First World War, and getting into that ballet and music things, it's a very, very strong statement. Many people were judging Picasso
Critical,
very critical about that. So they didn't care. They did always what they had to do, and I'm very happy for that, because for me it's a great it's a great thing to be able to look at those artworks on a daily basis and to share experience like we did with Sandy, because it's a beginning of we are continuing now.
You stayed friends, obviously.
Yeah,
or at
well,
least you're
maybe we will make the club now.
So before I turn questions to questions from all of you, I just wanted to end with one other thing that the two of you have in common, kind of by force of who you are, which is that you have the legacy of two astonishing studio spaces to take into the 21st century. The Calder Home and Studio in Roxbury, Connecticut, and the Picasso Home and Studio in Bois-Jaloux, in an hour and a half or so north of Paris. And both of these places I have had the great privilege to be at, and it's very, very clear in both that in anybody else's hands, well, not anybody else's hands, but it was highly against the odds in both cases that these two places would be here so many decades later with still an absolutely vivid sense of what took place there. And I bet everybody would just be interested to hear a bit about what was there when you took over and what your goals are for the years ahead in terms of those two incredible places.
Well, in our case, when my grandfather died in 1976, he left behind his main studio, the studio that he built in 1938. He had other studios before and he had other studios after, but that was the essential place. He built this glass box on the foundation of the old dairy barn on the Calder farm that had burned down before they bought the property. So he recycled this foundation and made this space, which you know. We're extremely lucky that all of this stuff was still there. I mean, so my grandfather was living much of his life in France and traveling a lot on commissions and so on. He had a problem in the United States and called the Vietnam War. And so he chose to live much of his life outside of the United States, coming here a few times a year and being in Connecticut a few times a year. And so it became this sort of state of suspended animation. He'd still work in the studio, but not so much. He'd still use the house, but not so much. So the house still has kind of the feel of the 1950s when they were rigorously living there and using this place. And the forest all grew up around it, all the scrub brush, and we've cleared the scrub brush now for the next, what's the next thing that's going to happen, this place that's been lost in time. And we're exploring right now what's the right way to keep it preserved and share it at the same time. We have thousands of people a year that ask to visit the place, and we can't accommodate anyone, really. I mean, a few friends. But I think it's become imperative that we share it. I think there's an energy there that should be shared.
So you're figuring it out.
We're figuring it out.
And Bois-Jaloux?
Yeah, and somehow in Bois-Jaloux, we're slowly deciding with Armin to do the same because next year there's going to be a Bois-Jaloux exhibition in a town called Rouen, an hour northwest of Bois-Jaloux, so almost 2 hours far from Paris, and so it's an exhibition which is titled the name of that place, and I did open that place for some small unknown association in the region, and the Bois-Jaloux, it's 1 hour drive northwest of Paris, and there are many social problems due to the expansion of the capital, and so I've been opening this house for some reason sometime, but now there are all those young kids from school who maybe want to experience something in education, and slowly, besides the fact it's an old house which we have to restore on a daily basis, so to make that useful, to give a purpose to a place which became yeah, important, because yeah, Picasso became quite famous lately, and he wasn't perceived like that always. I used to remember that in Spain during Franco time, people would name Picasso as a communist, antichrist, and a pornograph, which was very good for me when I would go back to school. You know, my French teacher would put me at the end of the class, you know, because I was really not
bad association.
So that's very important, and I think, yeah, we have this kind of responsibility, and also by doing so, it's very important. Next year also it will be in Musée Picasso Paris, a 1932 exhibition, which also juxtaposes very ambiguous life Picasso had between Marie Thérèse, his mistress, and Olga, his wife, and all those events of his life who made him able to create what we are admiring or looking at on each time we go to an exhibition or to a museum. So also by opening a place, a site, or trying to do something with a house or a residence, it's allowing to continue investigating yeah, and trying to share with specialists, with scholars, because of course it's not only about Picasso or me or Calder, but it's also a wish of sharing that with specialists and the public.
But which makes both of you quite rare, because that's a lot of work and not a job that too many of your peers have taken on in the same way, to say the least. So,
well, nobody wants to hear the tragedies of our life. You know, no one wants to shed a tear for me or Bernard. But we can shed a tear for each other, which
that's
is nice.
Right. That's yeah. Thank you, Sandy, for providing this particular space for this event.
Thank you, Anne.
And thank you both for a really wonderful conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Anne.